A story of resilience. When my husband fell ill, everything in our life seemed to crumble. The weight of the hospital bills, the medicines, the doctor visits. Each day became harder to manage. I had a full-time job, and while it covered some of our expenses, it wasn't enough to get us through this rough time. Our savings were nearly gone, and with no family around to help, I felt helpless. I was scared, constantly worrying about how we were going to make it through the next week, the next day. One morning, as I sat by my husband's bedside in the hospital, staring at his frail body hooked up to the machines, I made a decision. I couldn't let this go on. I needed more money. I needed to make sure he got the best care possible. I couldn't bear to see him suffer anymore, and if I didn't act soon, I feared what might happen. So, with a heavy heart, I decided to approach my boss and ask for a loan. My boss, Mr. Davis, was a charismatic man, always well-dressed and seemingly in control of everything. He was charming, and people naturally gravitated toward him. I had worked for him for almost 3 years and had always admired how smoothly he ran the company. He was always polite to me, but I had never gotten close to him on a personal level. My interactions with him were purely professional, but I knew he was wealthy, and I thought if anyone could help me in this situation, it was him. I was nervous as I walked into his office that afternoon. My palms were sweating, and my heart raced in my chest. I kept telling myself that this was for my husband, for his health. I had no choice but to swallow my pride and ask for help. "Come in," he said, glancing up from the papers on his desk as I knocked on his door. His voice was calm, almost too calm, and it put me on edge. "Mr. Davis, I need to speak with you," I began, feeling my throat tighten. He gestured for me to sit down, and I could feel his eyes on me as I tried to gather the courage to explain my situation. "What's going on?" he asked, his tone soft but direct. I told him everything about my husband's illness, the medical bills piling up, and the financial strain we were under. I told him I didn't know where else to turn and that I was desperate for help. I was wondering if I could borrow some money, I said finally, getting the words out. "Just enough to get through this rough patch. I'll pay you back as soon as I can, I promise." There was a long pause as he stared at me, his expression unreadable. I could feel the tension in the room, and my heart sank as I waited for his response. Part of me was afraid he would say no, but what came next was something I never could have expected. Mr. Davis leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. "You know, I've always thought you were a hard-working woman," he said, his eyes never leaving mine. "You've been loyal to this company, and I admire that." I nodded, unsure of where this was going. My stomach churned with anxiety, but I tried to keep my composure. "And I'd be more than happy to help you," he continued, his voice lowering slightly. "But you understand, of course, that nothing in this world comes for free." There was something in his tone that made me uneasy. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, suddenly aware of how small the office felt. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He stood up from his desk, and walked around to where I was sitting, standing behind me. I could feel the warmth of his body close to mine, and it made my skin crawl. He leaned down, his breath hot against my ear as he spoke. "You're a beautiful woman," he said, his voice dripping with a sleazy kind of chum. "I think we can come to an arrangement that benefits both of us." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest as the meaning of his words sank in. He wasn't offering me a loan out of kindness or goodwill. He wanted something in return, something I wasn't willing to give. "No," I said, my voice shaking as I stood up and backed away from him. "I can't. I won't do that." His smile faded, replaced by a cold, calculating look. "You might want to reconsider," he said, his tone now hard and unforgiving. "You need money, don't you? And I have it. It's really that simple." I felt trapped, like the walls were closing in on me. I had come here hoping for help, and instead I was being cornered into a situation that felt impossible to escape. But I couldn't do it. No matter how desperate I was, I couldn't betray myself or my husband like that. "I'll find another way," I said, my voice stronger now. "I don't need your money." I turned and walked out of the office, my legs trembling beneath me. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I had made the right decision. I couldn't let myself be manipulated like that, no matter how bad things got. But the story didn't end there. The next day at work, I could feel the tension in the air. Mr. Davis barely looked at me, and when he did, his gaze was cold and distant. I tried to focus on my job, but it was hard to shake the feeling of dread that hung over me. I knew I had made an enemy out of him, and I didn't know what that would mean for my future at the company. A few days later, I received an email from Mr. Davis requesting a private meeting in his office. My stomach turned as I read the message, but I knew I couldn't avoid him forever. I agreed to the meeting, hoping that maybe he had reconsidered his offer or that we could come to some kind of professional resolution. When I walked into his office, the atmosphere was different this time. The blinds were drawn, and the room felt darker, more oppressive. Mr. Davis was sitting at his desk, his face unreadable as he gestured for me to sit down. "I've been thinking about our conversation," he said, his voice calm, but with an edge to it that made me nervous. "And I've decided to give you another chance." I frowned, unsure of what he meant. "Another chance?" "Yes," he said, leaning forward slightly. "I'm still willing to help you, but the terms haven't changed. You can either accept my offer, or you can leave this company. It's up to you." My heart sank. He was giving me an ultimatum: either give in to his disgusting proposition or lose my job. I couldn't believe it. After everything I had done for this company, after all the hard work I had put in, he was willing to throw me away just because I wouldn't sleep with him. "I won't do it," I said, standing up and meeting his gaze with as much strength as I could muster. "I'll find another job somewhere where I'm respected. I won't be bullied into something I don't want to do." For a moment, he just stared at me, and I could see the anger building behind his eyes. But then, to my surprise, he smiled, a slow, cruel smile that made my blood run cold. "Very well," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "But don't think for a second that this is over. You'll regret this decision. I promise you that." I left his office feeling both terrified and strangely empowered. I had stood up for myself, even though it meant losing my job. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I knew I had done the right thing. And then things took a turn I never could have predicted. A few weeks later, as I was struggling to find a new job and keep up with my husband's medical bills, I received a call from one of Mr. Davis's business partners, a man I had met briefly at a company event. He told me he had heard about what had happened and wanted to offer me a position at his company. It was a higher-paying job with better benefits, and he assured me that I would be treated with the respect I deserved. I couldn't believe it. Just when I thought everything was falling apart, a new opportunity had fallen into my lap. I accepted the job, and within a few weeks, I was able to get back on my feet financially. My husband's health improved, and we were finally able to breathe again. As for Mr. Davis, I later heard that his inappropriate behavior had caught up with him. Several other women at the company had come forward with similar stories, and he was eventually forced to resign in disgrace. Looking back, I realize that sometimes, even in the darkest moments, there's a way out. You just have to stay strong and trust that things will get better. Life after that series of events felt surreal. For the first time in months, I could feel a sense of relief wash over me. The weight that had pressed down on my shoulders, suffocating me, finally began to lift. My new job was more than I could have hoped for, not just in terms of salary, but in the way I was treated. I was valued for my work, my skills, and my dedication. There was no shadow looming over me, no unspoken threats or insidious offers hanging in the air. It felt like I had finally found the place where I belonged. My boss, Mr. Crawford, was different from Mr. Davis in every way. He respected me, appreciated my hard work, and always made sure that the work environment was safe and professional. It was a stark contrast from the toxic atmosphere I had come from, and every day I felt more grateful that I had been given a second chance. If you liked my story, or if it resonated with you in any way, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. I'll be sharing more stories like this, stories about resilience, healing, and finding hope in the darkest of times. Thank you for listening.